between Game of the Ear and Hear Me Out are the two talks for the sound, two names for the sound design talk.
Yeah, just started the stream.
Oh, that's good. This is good. Show anyway. Let's go for it. Okay. So my name is Mello. I'm a composer, a sound designer. I make music aside from that. I'm a podcaster. I do a podcast called The Sample Study, where I analyze the history of music samples, most commonly hip-hop, and talk about what was sampled, talk about that artist, talk about why this new artist sampled them, and then I make the beat from scratch myself. But also interested in video games. I first got into the industry where I made this album called Chrono Jigga, which is a mix between the lyrics of Jay-Z and the music of Chrono Trigger. I think that showed people something interesting that could be done with both of those elements, and got me working on my first game, 2064, which led to a bunch of other games, including Cerebrawl, which was here and bugged out, and Celeste. Recently I had one of the remix tracks that you get on the B-side versions of the levels. It was me. My most recent thing is Memories of Tokyo To, a Jet Set Radio album, and then I also do a, I guess what would now be called Lo-Fi and Chill beat tape series called Midnight Broadcasts, which is what you just heard. This is now working for me. Here we go. Okay. So to get into composing and sound design, I basically jumped into a lot of stuff I didn't understand at the time and eventually learned it. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that in game dev, being a thing that you do to wear many hats. And I want to talk first about music and what that can do for a game. So music obviously has to set the tone. I have an example of that for how the mood of the overall game can be disturbed if it has the wrong tone. How important that is. I'm going to play a clip from the game Super Mario World, and with the castle music, look at how this door pops up almost on beat. As you move in, we go to a different phase of the song. It's all very orchestrated. It feels very right. But then, what if you just had normal music from Super Mario World over this part? With the same sound effects and everything. Just, you know, just another level. It's not a big deal. Alright, let's go kill a lizard. It's fine, it's happy. Don't worry about the lava, don't worry about anything. So, as you can see, the tone of a game can be greatly affected, that is the wrong side, from just the music alone. What music can also do is inform the player's approach and feelings. Not only the feel within the game itself as a piece of art, but also how the player approaches the game. Like a puzzle game has a certain kind of music. A fighting game has like a blood pumping kind of music. The music is very important to how the player is going to act. I have an example for that from my favorite inspirations, Katamari. So as soon as these levels start, you're immediately greeted with like this really cheery song that just kind of makes you want to go out there and explore and be pretty carefree and not really worry about what's going on. In having the style of music, it's usually like bouncy, jazzy, or like cute, really, I think, spurns the player on to explore, whereas like a more moody tone or something terrifying, like say from the Silent Hill series, might actually make you not want to explore and maybe just go die somewhere. As you hear in a moment, after this nurse dies, there is this horrible sound that definitely discourages you from exploring the environments in that game. So another thing that music can do for games, and has done a lot more recently, is dynamic scoring. When things change, the music can change depending on where you go. I'm going to show examples from two games that did this the best last year. which are Nier Automata and Super Mario Odyssey. This one's really short. As you turn this corner and you see the fireworks, all of a sudden a lot more elements come into the music. It's pretty powerful when it first happens. Super Mario Odyssey has a more in-depth one. Here, let me roll back a little bit. When you're hearing the stage music, you go into this pipe. Hearing the same music in a semi-8-bit tone. When you come out, it goes back. It's cool. It's something unique that was planned for in that game, and I think is really wowing when it first happens, and when it continues to happen. And music also, of course, can add extra significance to the events of a game. A lot of different ways. Like it can be as small as like being clearly made for the game, having lyrical content that references it. There are some games that have lyrical content in their theme songs that actually teaches you how you're going to play the game and what kind of gameplay styles you're going to be engaging with. And even sometimes a boss will have a song for like, this is how you defeat me, hidden in the song's lyrics. But I wanted to do this example from Snake Eater. Explaining the survival gameplay through these lyrics. You can do that in the game. It is very deep. Yeah, it's pretty neat. With all the things that music can do. But I cannot leave sound out, so we're going to go to that slide that I've been accidentally clicking on for 10 minutes. Same thing for sound. You would be surprised how much of your interaction with a game, the enjoyment that you feel, like the engagement that you feel with a game, comes from the sound side of things. You know, some of it is from the feel of how things snap in, and the timing of some animations, but a lot of it is from the sound. I do have another example for this of Super Mario Brothers with and without sound. Here's with. It's nice. Feels right. Satisfying when you kill things. It's like a video game. Here's without. You should feel dead inside. You should feel like something's missing from your life. Just completely despondent when you hear that. Takes a lot away. It feels like you're being denied satisfaction. Another thing sound can and will do for a game is to be distinct and cue a player into something that they will need or want to pay attention to. This ear training can make players more attuned to a particular thing, waiting to hear it, and by that get more invested in the game, in the gameplay, and being more immersed. I tried to get an example of the recent game God of War. Could not find any video that didn't have spoilers in it, but there are a lot of like birds in the atmosphere of the game. There are seagulls, crows, birds calling, but there is one particular bird that you're actually supposed to collect, called Odin's ravens, and they make a very particular calling sound that is different, and you can hear like a shimmering sparkle sound. The same thing happens for like the crystal creatures and the Dark Souls games. Which, speaking of, my next example is how sound design can kind of fulfill its most basic task of setting the atmosphere for a game. I want to share some of the atmospheres of the original Dark Souls. The way the sounds of your enemies echo, the way that everything feels lonely and desolate in these games, I think contributes much more to their style and feeling than, like, say, the marketing of how it's going to be the hardest thing you'll ever play. I think that if the like forlorn sadness of these games I want to give some info on how, sort of the practical section, I guess, of how to actually approach sound people. I don't think it's that hard to find us. I think we kind of come out in droves, to be honest. If you do something like use the hashtag GameAudio hashtag on Twitter, post a game job on maybe a Reddit board, though that can be a little dicey of like how experienced people you're going to get coming at you. And even scanning like credits of a game, or seeing someone on Twitter that you're interested in, and contacting them directly to see if they're available and what their rates are. Another really important thing, I think, is to be as upfront as possible about what you can offer in whatever initial posting you do or initial email you send out to these people, because it can be a lot if you give me an hour's worth of reading material on how your MMO is going to be the best thing ever, but you don't have any time to tell me that you actually couldn't pay me. Oops. And if you're approaching someone rather than they're approaching you, a nice thing to do, it's not really required, but if you can share like something about your project to get me invested, rather than just going straight to like, hey, how much would this cost? For me to know a little bit and get brought in on what exactly it is can feel nice, a little nicer for like a cold email open than just asking what my rates are. So this next one isn't necessary, but it can help a lot if you're in the right time and place to do it, to get a list of sound assets that you need, or an idea of how many minutes of music you'd want. It can make it really, really simple for us to give you quotes on sound. But if you don't have that, it's totally fine. You can even provide like the roughest example possible of what the scope of the game is. It's fine. And also, if we get more into the hiring process, be ready to provide examples. There is kind of like a misconception or a hesitancy to provide a direct example of like, hey, this is what I want. I want something like this, because some people might think it would limit our creativity or what we feel like we're allowed to do. But for a lot of us, it really helps. So just know exactly what you want, and then kind of incorporate that with what you have and try to work towards the best sound for your game. And it can be from any kind of media. You don't just have to share from other games. It can be from movies, TV, anime, whatever you like. So, and beyond that, after you've found a person you think is good, qualifications. Like, what kind of stuff are you looking for in a game audio person? The most important thing, I think, is to do your research and not just go for someone based on availability and price, generally. But you're going to want someone who has experience within games firsthand. You're not going to want to have to teach someone like how to work on games in any way. You're not going to want to like turn someone into a good employee who understands production schedule. So you might not just want to get your friend who does music every time, or your friend who does sound design. At least have someone who's like interested in and understands games, because it can be really valuable for a composer and sound designer to contribute to the team and the evolution of the game with their own ideas, rather than like kind of have you knocking on their studio door every time you need something. And also have someone with has experience for your type of game, like whatever you're doing. I'm going to talk a little more about this later, but just contacting anyone might not always be the best. You can run up against problems later where someone might just not be getting to what you wanted. Someone with something you admire, whether that's like the way they conduct themselves, their skill, their background, something they did in the past that you think could be interesting, just the knowledge that they show. Someone who you think is going to push you forward as part of your team and inspire you. Work with someone who has self-respect. This is my little tidbit of what my sound design talk would be like. I would be yelling at people for 30 to 40 minutes about not working for free, about not working for $5 an hour for 16 hours a day, or whatever, struggle bus stuff. Don't don't work with someone who's saying that they'll do for something for free, or whose rates are like vastly cheaper than what you've heard. That usually means that they are kind of hesitant reaching out into this world and might do like inferior or less competent work for you. You can, if it's someone you really want to work with, it's nice to bridge the gap and let them know, like, hey, I want to pay you a good rate here. Please let me pay you a good rate. But they might not have reached the right point in their career yet to start establishing rates and standards for themselves. Work with someone that you put in your game credits that you'd tag in a tweet safely. You know, someone I say here that fits well with the company culture. But what I'm really talking about is just no nasty people. You know, work with someone that you want, that you're okay with, like them having your game's name in their Twitter bio with whatever they're doing. Recently, multiple times, a quick social media check has saved me a lot of trouble with someone who's trying to work with me. Recently, the game Subnautica hired a sound designer who was doing all kinds of horrible harassment stuff on Twitter, and it caused kind of like a major downswing for their press, like right on the release of their final game. You just don't want anyone dragging down the team. Lastly, and most importantly, I think we should all seek out and give our time to underrepresented folks in the game industry. There are so many people who are drastically underrepresented in games, but totally here, or totally wanting to get in here. And just needing someone to let them prove themselves as part of your team, or someone to take people seriously. And I'm essentially saying, don't hire me. Right now, I'm essentially saying, look all around. Give everybody the same amount of time. Hire underrepresented folks. That's all I got to say. Like Jay-Z. So I do have, of course, the obligatory slide after telling you to hire people and pay people. The practicality of that. So I do want to say, offer some sort of payment always. Definitely don't ask someone to work for free. That can be a lot of different offers, a lot of different promises or conversations. Be honest about your budget. If you don't have a budget, be honest about that. If you don't have funding at the time, share funding plans with someone you're asking to work with you more than you would share with the average person who's asking about your campaign. You know, really get as in-depth as you can about what you're going to do. Your payment doesn't have to be upfront. It doesn't have to be guaranteed, but please plan to pay people at some point. We are used to working within budgets. You'd be surprised with what some of us could do. Rev share is also an option, essentially providing a percentage of the end profits of whatever the project is for people to work on it. I would certainly consider working rev share at this point if it was the right project, especially if it was set up front, which is my next point, to detail the form of payment with your job posting every time, like whether it doesn't pay at all, whether it's like a pre-Kickstarter thing, whether it's paid or whether it's rev share. It's going to like set the conversation off on the right foot that you have with anyone who's applying. And this is a super harsh point I have here. I hesitated on whether I should write it or not. But if you aren't at the point where you feel comfortable with offering like any sort of payment, it might be better to wait until you've gotten to a point in the project where you are more looking towards funding or more wanting to invest a little of your own money maybe on hiring someone. And I'm going to talk more about the right time to hire people later, because I'm definitely not saying like day one, as soon as you get a game idea, you better go out and hire all these people. Some big don'ts. This is my one negative slide. Things I hope no one would ever do. but things that pop up a whole lot, and some of them unconsciously, that I think it's important for y'all to know that are kind of pet peeves for us. One that kind of happens, questioning rates, reacting with surprise when we mention what our rate is, or maybe comparing one person's rate to another's and saying like, well, I might just go with them who are charging me this much if you're thinking of charging me that much. But if you were to lower that, don't pit sound people against each other, or really any worker on a contract or joining your team basis, or availability. Don't make anyone feel like they would have to drop everything to work on your project, or it's not going to happen. This is a big one, which is why I bolded it. Touting any kind of exposure as a reason to work for free, no matter who, like what person, what their clout score is, rest in peace, that you got on your projects. It's not, exposure is like a negligent, if at all even a thing, resource for sound designers and composers. It has never helped me. In fact, I think it's only hurt me to take jobs that were for that. It's not payment. It's not a reason for anyone to work with you. The conversion rate to actual gigs, for me at least, is non-existent, and I hear the same. No matter how large of a scale this could be, it's just a myth. So another thing that happens a lot is Kickstarters, right? You don't know the game is going to happen. You don't know if you're going to get any funding from it. And sometimes you want to reach out to people to see if they can give you a little something up front to help with your crowdfunding campaign, to put their name on it, to maybe have like a few songs or some sound effects. Typically I'm actually paid for this, whatever my rate is, to do this, but a few times people have come up to me and asked if I would be okay doing a few songs for free. The answer is no. But it is a little annoying to assume that is just something a musician will do to get attached to a project. I get a lot of messages about jumping in on a Kickstarter. I've only done it one time, and the people who I did it for were dear friends, and also, more importantly, I really liked the game. So, next point. Like I said, this is the rude slide. If you can't pay, just tell me. Don't take up our time too much before getting to the point where you admit that you don't have funding. If approaching us and we feel that your wants and needs don't really line up with what we think that we specialize in, and suggest that maybe you didn't do as much research before reaching out to us, it can be a little odd. And it can make us hesitate taking a job if we feel like, I don't know if I'm the right person for this. You know, I do music, but I don't know if I can conduct an orchestra. And that's me talking. I really can't conduct an orchestra. Please don't ask me to do that. There's a problem that I'm sure all of us have run up against, especially being part of groups that get a lot of brand new game devs, is that you have no game, but you have a lot of concept. It's not really the time to start approaching people. So now I'm going to talk about the actual difference between hiring a music and sound person early and hiring them late, the real effects, the real benefits. If you bring a composer in late, you're not going to be able to see like any of this that's behind me. If you bring a composer in late, usually the tone of the game has already been set, maybe with placeholder music, maybe with stuff from another musician. There's not enough room for us to kind of elbow in and figure out what could be a cool style for this game and to pitch a style. Usually feel like less of a part of the team. You don't get to make the same decisions you would if you were a composer earlier on. The structure of the game likely won't support dynamics like the stuff I showed in Nier Automata and Mario Odyssey. That was stuff that was obviously planned very early on. Areas were structured in order to support that. There are all kinds of like cute and fun things you can do with music that you might just not be able to bring in at a later date if it hasn't been planned for somewhat. So you might end up with a less interactive musical game than you could have had if you started a little earlier with planning for that. Kind of like I said earlier, there's less time and room to develop a sound and make a case for a style. Having 3 to 6 months to make a whole soundtrack, which has totally happened to me, is real crunch time. You kind of have to come up with something that the team likes really, really fast and rush through it really, really fast. It's better for the music to be able to evolve more naturally with the game. Now, if you hire a composer early, they can get to know the team personally and make decisions together. They will plan for dynamic stuff. They'll encourage everyone with early drafts. I consider music to be a really fast asset. Like if you give me a few examples, I can kind of just start pumping out songs. And I find a common effect with the games that I work on is that people feel like the game is a lot more real once they start hearing the music, and that can kind of spur everyone on to do more real feeling work as well. So yeah, when there aren't any restrictions to the time frame of music, and there's a lot of wiggle room, music can actually sometimes branch ahead of the game and inform other types of design. Like for example, when I was working on 2064 Read-Only Memories, I got to the point where we needed a puzzle, and I suggested that I be put in the game, which is not at all vain. It was for video games. And that I'd be put in the game as a street musician who actually helped me finish my songs. And it ended up being kind of one of the most, I guess, memorable puzzles of the entire game because of the way I was able to kind of flex my dynamic music skills a little bit. The sound designer involvement. Similarly to the dynamic stuff, bringing in a sound designer late, sound designers are going to think of cool stuff. They're cool people. They have like garages full of weird things that make weird sounds. They're cool. They might think of things that would have been neat ideas if introduced earlier in development, but at this point might widen the scope. And we don't want to widen the scope. I widened scope yesterday. I still feel bad about it. The team is used to the placeholder sounds that have been there since forever, whenever you hadn't hired someone. And as much as the new sounds could be better, I've noticed that people take a long time to warm up to new sounds and just will be attached to the old stuff even if it wasn't good. It's a strange thing. It takes a lot of time, and sometimes that time is not there at the end of the game, so it can be very difficult when you have someone making multiple drafts of stuff when they don't really need to. It's just that the adjustment period is weird. Ideas in the game sometimes are kind of waiting for a sound person to make it work or make it pop. Like, once this has sound, it's going to work. But sometimes there are cases where you get to that and the sound doesn't work immediately, or you realize you didn't know what you wanted exactly to be in that place. And also, in adding an entire new layer of sound can change the feel of the game significantly. For worse, it can just feel a little weird. For better, it can just feel a little weird. But at the worst case, it could start making people question, like, what kind of game is this? That feels different. The sound person being added early can identify issues, like things that might widen the scope, like things that might not practically work with sound, and also identify opportunities, like the sound effects being a major signifier of where ravens are hidden in God of War, for example. Cool sound ideas can be incorporated and developed from early on rather than just had to be left under the table. Often long feedback process can be made part of the schedule. An important thing that I learned when working on the game Cerebrawl, which has a lot of 2D animation, takes forever, is that I couldn't really work on sound effects for anything until I had like a full character's animations to work with. And before that, anything I made was kind of just getting changed or thrown out. So my timeline actually had to be synced with the animator's timeline, so that whenever he was done with the character, I would start making their sounds. He would start with the next character. To have a sound designer in the schedule like that is very useful and very efficient. And the last thing is, like I said, sound designers are cool. They have cool ideas. They can prepare equipment or materials to make unique sounds for your games, like, I don't know, like a glitched speak and spell for a robot or something like that. Just an example off the top of my head. Unique sound creation tools that can make something very memorable for your game, where we might not just have that ready to go as custom as you'd want if it was introduced late. Okay, so the very last thing I want to talk about is, obviously this talk is about hiring people early. When is it too early? Definitely a time. It's different, slightly different for both sound designers and musicians. The biggest thing is, I guess, like the asset drain. Early sounds in music might become obsolete. You might not like that type of music anymore. The stuff the sounds was for might not exist anymore, or they may need to be remade if the game changes drastically. I put drastically, but even a tiny change, like an animation change, could make a sound completely useless. The game might develop a need for something the current sound person isn't suited to provide. The people might decide that instead of an orchestral soundtrack, you want jazz. I would love to know what game makes that big of a change, but that's the example that I had. In maybe your sound person, you hired an orchestra type of person who suddenly might find themselves, outpaced by what the design is becoming. You may switch from wanting a bunch of synthetic sound effects to suddenly being like, oh, I think actually Foley would work better if you could just be a Foley person. No, I only do synths. I'm sorry. Okay, that's my one-person play. Sound design, we kind of already talked about this in the last slide. Sound design is dependent on other members' timelines. We kind of ended up kicking rocks a lot, waiting for something to do. If we're brought in too early, too early, some animations should be locked down. I feel that the game should be mostly stable as far as like the core loop of what you're going to be doing before you get a sound designer in there. But you can hire a composer as early as when you have a strong concept, when the game is actively being made, and funding is pretty important, or at least a plan for funding. I think a composer, like I said, music is a fast asset. A composer can get started very early in giving you something real. Just having some music in a Kickstarter campaign can be a huge boost towards, like, here's what this game is going to feel like. Whereas a sound designer is better when the game is in deeper development and the foreseeable future looks pretty stable idea-wise. Maybe like before you show a prototype at a show would be a good time. Hey, let's get like a polish layer on these sounds. This is something anyone can walk up and play at this point. Let's polish it just a little bit. That could be a good time to bring in interim sound designer. I believe that is my portion of the talk. So if anyone has any questions about anything at all, it can be about my work, it can be about the things I've talked about here.
I have a question.
Yeah. Oh, you. Why did it? I can't see your mouth. Yes.
Where would we go to figure out how much to pay a sound designer? Is there stats on that sort of thing that's available?
I don't know if there are, but I can tell you. I think that the average price I've heard for music, for composition, is in indie. You would expect to pay or offer about $100 per minute of composition. Obviously, the minute of the musical time, not the minute of working time. Yeah. I wouldn't be here. I'd be in a Rolls Royce or something. For sound design, typically people charge per asset, and I've pretty much heard like around $10 to $20 per asset is the price you would expect from a sound designer. Some are more expensive, some are less. And there are other options in the interim. There are like sound effect libraries that you can buy. There's usually not all around ones. They're usually for specific things. Like here's $30 for a bunch of wind, thunder sounds, or $30 for a bunch of electric machines. And there are also free sound effect sites. There are those huge GDC game audio bundles that have a lot of sound effects in those that you can use in the interim. But if you're looking for custom sound effects, yeah, I would say like $10 to $20 per asset is how people are going to charge. Yeah, I actually did see you raise your hand.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's fine. Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Like, I may have missed what you said, but like, what kind of genre of music do you think the new album is called? Like, is there a certain genre?
Yeah, it is. It's a very dead genre, but it exists nevertheless. So I was most inspired by what was called like big beat electronic music. It is a style of electronic music that was very briefly like incredibly popular. The biggest name is The Prodigy, which had an album called Fat of the Land in 1997 that was like on MTV and everything. And around that time there was also the Matrix soundtrack that featured a lot of big beat music, the Jet Set Radio game, which featured kind of a blend of big beat and hip hop and funk. But it was a huge electronic trend for a very brief period of time, and I've always still been fond of it, and I think that it can still be relevant in a way. Other artists like the Crystal Method, there's an artist called Propeller Heads, a lot of really high concept, high quality, very loud, abrasive style hip hop referencing electronic music.
You consider the Chemical Brothers?
Chemical Brothers, yeah, absolutely. Maybe more like house or techno, but I think that they eventually just, they rode the big beat wave when it was there, and then they kept going like before and after that.
So it's called Big Beat?
Big beat, yeah.
Okay, but like some of the songs I was hearing earlier, it's kind of ambient.
Oh,
Is that something?
my latest project
Yeah,
is a big beat thing, but the songs that you just heard, kind of, there are a lot of genre names these days, but I would say like chill hip hop or ambient hip hop, down tempo, would be that style.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So, since you are a composer and sound designer, do you prefer that if you do one on a project, do you prefer to also do the other? And if so, I know you have done both on projects, but like if so, like how does that workflow divided? Like, do you do it all at once generally, or is it like sound design comes later?
Yeah, sound design usually comes after, and I do prefer to do them both. It's very, I think, rare. Usually there's a sound designer already on the project or a composer already. But I do prefer to do them both because one of the things that you can do in that position is to have the sound design really complement the music and vice versa. Like for 2064, I use a lot of the same instruments that I use to make the music to actually make the sounds as well. In like Super Nintendo games, every piece of sound on that hardware is running off of the same samples, and often the sound effects are just like a heart being played really fast to create this cursor sound. On the NES, you just have all blips and bloops, and it's kind of harkening back to that. And yeah, typically sound design comes much later once stuff is done. But what's nice about being both a composer and a sound designer is I can always be working. I can work on music until sound design opportunities are available. I can switch on and off. I would say that like the most optimal operation would be to have someone who can do both composition and sound design. Though as Alex said, it's not really something to expect or think that everyone can do. But, you know, I was just a composer who was asked to do it, and I ended up having an interest in it, and you might find someone like that too. Yes?
So, sometimes as a designer, I get clients who ask for revisions and everything. Do you ever have a fee for revisions, or you have so many times to revise until you have to charge if they get too annoying?
Totally.
How would that work?
Yeah. No, clients are the worst, right? No. I typically have a contract where I allow for 5 revisions. And yeah, mostly when I'm working with someone who's like a complete stranger or who's going to have me on like a contract basis, I think. I'm pretty good about drafts generally, and if I feel like we're really close, I probably wouldn't cut them off, but you don't want to make an entirely new sound 5 times. You know, you don't want to make an entirely new design so many times. So I do have a limit, but I don't think I've ever had someone who has exceeded that. I had one person who I did 3 drafts for that were very different, and they said, "I'll do it myself." And I don't know how that's working out, but
I've read that happens to freelance writers often enough that
sounds
people
right.
use the revision process to get them to write several different things, which then the payer can, if they even pay once, they can use those for like 5 different blog posts instead of pay for one. You did all that work for a dishonest person who's not going to help you.
I'm going to add a line in my contract when I get home, I think. Hey, please don't make me make 5 different songs.
And then so
Any more? Oh, yes.
We got a question from YouTube viewers.
Oh, no. Go ahead.
So, Alex Jarvis, his question is, you mentioned placeholder music. Do you think it's a good idea to use such music to help convey what you want the final music to sound like? Or is it better to leave the game mute?
No. No, music is wonderful. Music is life. Alex. Yes, placeholder music is fantastic. It will essentially, at its best, it will not be something that the team falls in love with. It becomes a deterrent. It will be something that it actually just becomes a reference for the composer that you bring on. Yeah, I should have walked that one back a little bit. Placeholder music is totally good for a game, as long as you remember that it's your example, and that you're going to be able to get something more custom. You shouldn't settle with like whatever you were using. You should dream big. Composers can do a lot of cool stuff. The camera's right there. Yes. Anyone?
Yeah. So kind of from your side, because I'm a composer. Like, what do you recommend? How do you recommend like kind of getting into the field of games and things? Like, because I'm a pretty confident composer, but I'm not really sure how to find the right projects and things.
Yeah. I think the way that I keep finding work, I think, is talking to people, networking. I so despised being told to network when I first started, because it felt like skeezy in a way. Like, oh, you know a person, you know, it's everyone's working against me. But then I just started talking to people and being a normal person, and I think that when you approach people earnestly with what you want to do, and you let it be known, like, hey, I'm pretty passionate about this and I'm putting it out there. I use Twitter. I think it's very good for this. To not immediately approach with the intent of being on someone's game if they're not really looking for people yet, but maybe to just message people directly, get to know them, even talk to other composers like you're doing right now, I guess, about what they do and like which circles they run in. More practical thing you can do right now is something I've had some success with is going following the Screenshot Saturday hashtag or trends on in game development circles, and sort of hitting up people who look like they have a game that's pretty solid. Just ask if they're in need of any music or other sound stuff, or if they have anyone they're talking to right now. It could end up being something. It could not. Just keep in touch with anyone you know making a game. But actually, the most important thing I'd say is just to keep making music. Keep making music that you can show to people when asked. Build up a portfolio. Always show that you're working on something, so that people will remember you're active and kind of remember your name. I hope any of that helps.
It does. Cool.
Yes.
Just wondering how and at what age you first became a musician.
At 13, I got a program from the Walmart called Screen Blast Acid 4.0. There is a program called Sony Acid Pro 4 that is the pro version, but whatever, man. I had this software that was basically used for scoring your own home movies and stuff, and it had this big CD of samples, like loops, drum loops, and synth loops that I could use. I just started messing around with that stuff, and at a very early age, and eventually evolved into understanding I can make my own sounds with synths, but I gotta get a different program because this is crap. And just slowly evolving, getting into music in what I still think is just the weirdest way. Just starting with putting samples together and ending up understanding how a lot of different instruments work and composing for them. I actually don't really play anything proficiently. I usually start writing stuff on the piano, but I wouldn't say I'm an excellent piano player by any means. But I've been paying attention to the voice of each instrument, what it can and cannot do, and that's how I kind of write pieces.
And by can and can't do, you mean what emotion it elicits, or?
That and some instruments are better at legato play. Some are little staccato hits of melody. Some instruments excel at providing a certain rhythm or feel to the piece that other ones just can't. You wouldn't want to have maybe you would. You wouldn't want to have a glockenspiel playing your main melody, I guess. Maybe that's some hate on the glockenspiel.
Let's not be hasty.
Okay. Might be a little hasty.
Yeah, that could be something you live to regret.
Oh, no, I live to regret pretty much everything I say at talks.
Your next piece is a glockenspiel.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
The next guy that beats you out of a job is
It's gonna be
glockenspiel.
Mr. Glock.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm gonna go with it.
What's a typical financial arrangement for soundtracks and sales and all that?
For soundtracks, yeah. So I try typically to negotiate sales of the soundtrack on at least one platform. For Read Only Memories, I let them have Steam and Humble and iTunes and stuff, and I just went on Bandcamp, which is where I was going to push because I get the best return from there. I do really, really like to negotiate the sale of a soundtrack outside of the game, the rights to that, and I will definitely lower my rate even to make that happen. It's pretty important to me. I think it's really important for the longevity of the game. I think something that all composers understand is that your soundtrack is going to do as well as the game it's attached to. There's not a lot of cases where you see a soundtrack going really wild with getting out there. If the game didn't get out there, you don't really see a lot of that. It's usually both coming out together, or the game gets big but the soundtrack doesn't really. So yeah, it's very important to me to have the rights to my soundtrack. It's not important to everyone.
But do you get a percentage of it, the soundtrack, or the whole soundtrack on one platform?
On one platform.
But nothing on another platform?
That's what I did. You can definitely also negotiate just having rights to it everywhere. I, at that time, wanted to make sure the company would get a little bit as well, and just take my certain, from Bandcamp I get the best return. Didn't really care that much about what I would get from iTunes or Steam. So I just kind of tried to maximize like what my profit would be while also being fair to them. And it would also be pretty complicated, I think, if the payment of that soundtrack had to get separated out and so and so. You had another question?
You mentioned sites that have a lot of free sounds to download. I was just wondering if you could name 2 or 3.
Yeah. It's going to sound like a joke, but freesound.org. Literally just, it's the people at Freesound are gods. They especially the people who do Creative Commons 0. Just like, I recorded a bunch of sea lions that I found. I recorded this tire rolling across ground. You basically have a search box, and in it you can put like your wildest imagination. Someone has probably recorded the sound. It's a good resource. It does help to have a little bit of sound editing experience, because some of the stuff, 90% of the stuff doesn't come out of the box sounding great. But it's really good pieces to work with, in a lot of cases.
This is kind of a general question. How do you find yourself, or challenging yourself to like develop your musical capacity, however you want to put it? Do you find, you mentioned like trying new instruments, do you find yourself trying to take on new kind of like musical mood or theme and trying to do it in a different way that you haven't done before?
Yeah, I'm very competitive. So if someone tells me I can't do a thing, I typically like to do it immediately. Which is kind of the case with the Jet Set Radio music that I did. It was a style that not a lot of people had tackled. It's the kind of thing where you expect the fans of this property, when you say that you've done this, to be, no way. No one can do it like these original composers did it. And I want to challenge myself to completely overcome that statement and just make someone think, oh no, it's totally possible. Because once you get past that doubt, I think you open it up for other people to come in with the same style and have less trouble overcoming that audience. As far as with games, I'm always taking challenges. Like, for example, I'm about to work on a title that is mostly like free piano jazz, which, as I said, I'm not a very good piano player, so it's incredibly scary. But at the same time, I really love jazz, and I want to try to make it work and get over that personal hump to something I've always wanted to do. It seems like the perfect chance to do so. So I probably push more of those boundaries in my personal work, the stuff I decide to do. But whenever I get the chance to get over a hang-up or a fear in a game I'm working on, I usually take it. And I think that's something that's important to be honest about with the people you're going to be working with. Like, this is something I have a lot of passion for, but not necessarily the experience. So if you'll just believe in me for a moment. Yeah, that's how that goes. YouTube?
No, just me.
Well, get out of here.
Actually, so, if there's a composer that you know, and you've listened to a bunch of their work, and there's something that you want for a game that isn't necessarily something in the genre that they've done before, or something that might be outside of their sound that you've heard so far, is it inappropriate to ask them to give it a try? I mean, not just for free, but just, to ask them for, to contract with them to do something like that. How would you ask them to do something that you haven't heard them do before,
Yeah, I pretty much just lay it out as clearly as I can. Well, in the weird occasion that I would be hiring someone, I guess is where I'm going with this. Lay it out in a way that doesn't emphasize their lack of experience, I guess, but says like, hey, would you be willing to try this with me? Start them off with a few specific examples. That's usually what I want immediately when I'm asked to do something I feel is outside of my comfort zone. Like, I don't want someone to be disappointed by the fact that I can't play this live trumpet that you want, and I don't know if you know that, but I have to get across to you. It can be, it's completely based on like your understanding of the person you're hiring and the person you're hiring's understanding of what you want. So I think once the water's made warm and comfortable, like, hey, just try anything. I'm willing to hear what you can do because I like your style in particular. I think that's the best way to approach it, is just to make them really comfortable with it, show them exactly what you're talking about. Should be fine.
And follow up on that, what would be the way that you would like to hear that it wasn't a good fit, you know, like that what what you made for somebody wasn't quite what they were looking for? How would you prefer hearing that if you have to do that?
It's a good question. That's I think I would honestly just like it given to me straight, that to not do like the construction of criticism like after you've already decided no. It was a little weird. Like, you could have done that better anyway. We're rejecting you. But if you had known that you could have done that better, maybe you would have gotten in. Just to avoid any like constructive criticism at that point, if you've already decided that you're not going with them, pretty much just give like the most plain, hey, we've decided to go with someone else in the project, or we've decided to. No, actually, it leaves it a little bit too open even to say we've decided to reevaluate the style. So yeah, just the plainest way possible. Just we've decided to go with someone else, or to open up to other people.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, that's an uncomfortable one. I have a lot
No,
of
let's get into it.
fear of that kind of a situation.
The audio equivalent of we need to see other people?
What?
Is it the audio equivalent of I think we need to see other people?
No, that's like when you're halfway into a project and you're like, boy, this piano isn't it doing it for me. It's just not like doing it for me like it used to. I think it wouldn't hurt, the relationship we have with this piano is strong. The relationship everyone has with the piano is strong. People want pianos these days. There's plenty of other chords in the C. But I just don't think it's going to work out. Yeah. We have a minor problem.
No.
This is supposed to be a happy game. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you brought this on, so enjoy. This talk is a wreck now.
I got a happier one.
I don't believe you.
If you had the opportunity to work on any type of game or any game that already exists or is going to exist, what would you think would be really fun? Just like your dream project to work on?
At this point, I would have actually given a different answer last year. But at this point, I really, really, really want to work on a horror game. I would love to work on the revitalization of Silent Hills with Junji Ito. It's totally going to happen. No worries about that. It's on track. Company definitely isn't owned by Yakuza. It's totally cool. I would love to work in a horror game. Seriously, I've been building up. I've been like buying specific sound libraries and acting like I'm about to work on one. If I had time to learn other aspects of game development myself, it's probably what I would try to make. It is the genre that gives you so much capability to mess with people with audio. It's like a wonderland, and I really want to know what that love is. It's just all these freaking platformers getting me down. I want to scare people. I want to feel something again. I think that horror audio is just, it's where you really, really get to play around. When one of the games that I worked on, Read Only Memories, got a lot darker around the ending, and I think that's around the time that I realized that I like taking what I made and destroying it. Just adding all these filters and effects and distortion, subliminal stuff, messing around with people. It's very fun. Horror games.
I actually had a
Not really.
Just got here. Yeah.
I have not.
How did you get involved with that project?
So it was mostly from being, I guess, posted on Reddit. My Chrono Trigger and Jay-Z mashup got a lot of heat off of that. At that time, the person who eventually led the team that made ROM was not even in game development at that time. He was running a convention called GamerX, and he reached out to me to be at that convention as a performer. And yeah, it was a big moment for me. Like, they want me to come to California and be on a stage. And yeah, at that time, just messing around with that idea of going out there. Eventually, they decided they were also about to run a Kickstarter for this game that was going to be like a tribute to Hideo Kojima's Snatcher, and like this kind of subgenre of adventure game that kind of petered out at some point. And yeah, I was involved in the Kickstarter with like 4 other composers. Ended up becoming the main composer, and also the sound designer. After the sound designer, who I mentioned earlier in this talk, people who've never worked on games before, can be kind of hard to get into the mold working on games. This sound designer was mostly for theater, and kind of found a hard time transitioning into games. And they asked me if I could do sound design. And I continued to take on a lot of different responsibilities for that team, including directing all the voice actors for the voice update. So I got to work with a bunch of cool people doing that, learning about scheduling, and basically had to become a casting director for a brief period of my life. I got about 200 auditions that I had to go through.
You did a great choice with the voice actor.
Thank you. A lot of them are like, I feel, the only person who could have played the role. Like, I think people were very, very hostile to the idea of adding voice acting, and I understand that. Luckily, you can turn it off, but I do think that we did a really good job, and that the actors did an excellent job for us, more importantly.
And I actually have another question. I'm sorry, I don't really talk.
No,
but,
please.
Like, the ROM soundtrack is compared to like in-night broadcasts.
Mhm.
Like two like very different vibes. Like there's definitely like someone thread in it, but sort of what was your when it comes to the scope of the different kind of music that you make? You know, you have like some of this hip hop stuff, some of this more like instrumental lo-fi, and then you have more of this very that soundtrack to 2054. It's like, how do you sort of make all those things so sound like you?
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of things I want to do in music while I'm here. Still a lot of things. And I think each of those things, though they seem vastly different, and like I'm ping-ponging from thing to thing, I've actually kind of been forming them all in my mind at the same time. So the reason that even these vastly different styles sound similar, I think, and are all identifiable as me, is because I have the same mindset kind of working through all of it. Yeah, so in a way, the compositional period I was going through from 2014 to 2017 was one thing. And a lot of that material came from that period. So I think you could see a DNA that's common across all of them, if that makes sense. How's YouTube doing?
Nobody else was asking anything.
Now, how are they doing? Can you ask them how they're doing?
Yeah, sure.
Ask them a question.
Yeah, yeah. Turn the tables, internet. What's your clout score? Are they going to take 10 seconds to respond? Is that what we're doing now?
The way the stream's
There's
going,
a cloud
probably about
2 minutes.
All right. Did you have to increase the cooldown timer because everyone was saying no, work for free?
No.
Good.
Nobody wants you to work for free.
Amanda, you made me work for free. That's the
I
thing.
didn't make you. You
Call
forgot
out,
to invoice
call
me.
out.
That doesn't count.
Okay, it's 8 o'clock. It's time for the call out hour.
Call out that you forgot to invoice me?
Yep. It's a call out of myself for actually not
How far do
invoicing.
you want to go, Mello?
Not that far. Not that far at all.
I don't want anybody to work for free. I want them to work for exposure.
Oh,
Gross.
Terrible.
Terrible. Filthy. Filthy. Okay. Oh yeah. Those are all fantastic questions that were totally in line with the stuff I was trying to talk about. So thank you, everyone.
Do you have questions you'd like to ask yourself?
Questions I'd like to ask myself. Yeah. Why haven't you cleaned up the apartment? When are you going to go back to normal schedule? When are you going to start working out again? Is car insurance important? What else is going on in my mind today? Should I get a lizard?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah?
Should I get a lizard in June?
Sure.
Okay.
Why not May?
When's the next?
Because I'm not ready yet.
Why not
When's
now?
the next reptile convention?
When's the next reptile convention? It's in June. That's why. That's why.
yeah.
Then you're getting a lizard in June.
Yeah.
Sounds like your work is I'll help you choose a lizard.
What's that?
I said I'd help you choose a lizard.
Have you owned
Yeah,
a-
you should.
Have you owned a lizard before?
Nope. I've wanted to since even before I wanted to make music. Specifically a bearded dragon.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I saw them and I just think they're so wonderful. I was one of those kids that like dinosaurs.
Yeah.
I love
I
Godzilla.
was a geologist. I understand
Oh, wow.
the dinosaur thing.
They've always been my favorite type of pet to want to have.
You know, the stuff we have here is 400 million years old. The youngest fossils here, so there's no dinosaurs.
Yeah.
But in Utah, I've walked up and seen them in the room.
I want to go someday.
It's
Sounds
pretty
amazing.
cool.
Yeah.
It's the only place I've ever seen where it's like, oh, that looks like a dinosaur bone. Not somebody has to explain that this is a dinosaur bone.
I visited the Museum of Natural History recently, and in New York,
Oh, very
and
cool.
there are stacks on stacks of dinosaurs.
Stacks
You
on
have a
stacks on
question
stacks.
So many. I have a question. Yes. Hello.
What's the most musical lizard?
Radical Rex, I think. He's a real cool Radical Rex.
So he's lyrical also.
He's lyrical. Gex is like the person who wants to be in a band in high school but never actually really goes through with it, but carries the guitar wherever he goes. You know?
He knows how to play Wonderwall.
I think Gex would know how to play Creep, and that's it. But it didn't stop him from being my crush. Anyway. YouTube, how's it going?
Nothing?
Your question did get asked because I saw you point at the camera.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
What if you named your bearded dragon?
I think that's it.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so if I go with my naming convention, I just got a plant, and I named it Biollante, which is a kaiju name from Godzilla. Oh, and I should probably just keep going with the Godzilla names, but I kind of want to switch it up. And I don't know yet. Honestly, I've decided that I think I need to meet the lizard before naming it.
See if you could blow smoke rings.
Yeah.
You know, I feel a little cliche if you name the lizard Godzilla.
No way. No, I'm never doing that.
You gotta
Name
do
it
like
Mothra.
Icarus.
No, that's for my human son.
You're not gonna name it after Godzilla's son?
I feel like it's child abuse, Amanda.
The name is Manila.
It's Manila. Manila wafer.
If you name your child Godzuki,
Yeah. Godzuki, if y'all really want to get technical, Godzuki is from the cartoon. Manila is in the film Son of Godzilla.
You haven't
Yeah.
forced me to watch this yet, so I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
We'll get there. Godzilla Podcast, my next project. I'm going to critically analyze this love of my life and probably end up hating about 70% of it as I go and watch through all these movies.
It's been like my dream for like the past like 2 years. I've been wanting to make a Godzilla podcast just so I can use the term Godzilla. So
Whoa,
I
whoa. Whoa.
was
You better trademark that.
You're true.
No. Why don't we do it together?
Dude, let's do it.
Okay. All right. Godzilla Podcast. It's raising. You know how many? I think these two are already on it. No, Adam said.
I can talk if you want.
No, you said you have a bad radio voice.
I feel like my voice is grating and irritating to people.
No, I think you just don't have volume control.
You're not wrong. That's why you have physical volume control.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, there's clipping is the thing.
Yeah.
So.
I'll just sit in the back of the room and yell.
So the Blue Oyster Cult's Godzilla, is that an inspiration?
Um,
Are you stealing or sampling from that?
Godzilla theme.
Oh.
Using pieces from that? I mean,
it was-
that's the only music, Godzilla music I know of right offhand, but
They probably. I bet Toho owns the rights to that at this point. I know they used it.
Sure they do.
They used it to
Oh yeah, definitely.
promote TNT's Monster Jam back in the 90s. I was just watching the commercial for that, and they totally used that song.
It was in Shin Godzilla.
The Blue Oyster Cult song was in Shin Godzilla?
Maybe.
Oh,
Maybe it was
gosh.
Something else.
That would be amazing. That would be very on the nose.
I saw him perform it in 75.
Oh, shit. That's a Godzilla times.
Yeah.
That's when some good stuff was going down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to make my own Godzilla song and not get
Yeah.
sued,
Yeah.
like Pharaoh Monch.
It's still honor him. I mean, you can still have him on the
Yeah.
list, right?
It's just be called Big Lizard. You know who I'm talking about. It's the big lizard with the big clout. Legally distinct lizard. You're copyright free. I know what you really, really mean to me. Big lizard.
Have we run amok of your entire night, Alex?
No,
Or
this is
too
fun.
far? Okay.
What else would I be doing?
Louisville makes games in the building.
It's keeping me from working.
Two Mellos in the building. We're keeping you from working.
I have an actually serious question.
All right.
Yes.
Have you ever worked on a game from start to finish, from high concept to release?
Only 2064.
Okay.
Real Memories. Not only did I work on it from start to finish, I worked on it from start to finish twice because we had an expansion that was essentially a new game. The first
Those are the best expansions.
the first development was I think 2.5 years, and the last one was 1.5 years. So yeah, from start to finish on that project, I was there. A lot of the other stuff I've been working on is not finished, like Cerebrawl is still in progress. Celeste, obviously, I just came in for one song. And pretty much everything else I've worked on, they hired a composer late. Because I didn't make this talk yet. Now everything will change.
What is your favorite song off the 2064 soundtrack?
Distant Scenery is actually there's a good story to be had with Distant Scenery. It was a song that I was attempting to hide inside the game because I thought that it wouldn't match the style, but I really loved it and I wanted to get away with it. So initially I hid the song inside the you can look at San Francisco's Sutro Tower from a certain perspective on Market Street in the game. You actually, this is an adventure game, so you actually hit a button that says look. And at that time the music plays. It's kind of a hidden Easter egg thing. It's still in the game. But the team actually did end up liking Distant Scenery and putting it in a certain location later on.
Maybe a boring question, but do you ever feel burnout with the work you do? And if so, do you have any general remedy?
Oh, yeah, totally. It's not a boring question at all. Yeah, just like last week, I couldn't even look at my work without wanting to spit. I do go through periods of burnout, and typically the best thing to do is to indulge myself in the stuff that helps me do the work, which is like mostly other media, like reading. Maybe taking the time to like write some big blog post about where I'm at, even if I don't even publish it, just to get my headspace, talk to people, take walks, listen to other music. Sometimes I actively avoid listening to other music because I don't want it to influence stuff I'm working on, but doing that can help. Just getting away from the project for a responsible amount of time, not pushing yourself, but also not like saying, hey, I need a month off, and eventually you get better and better at it. And you get better and better at scheduling yourself responsibly. It can be really tempting to want to crunch over a weekend because you're just going to get so much done, and you're going to be so further ahead than everyone else or than where you were. But it's never worth it. You would have gotten there slow and steady anyway. So I think it's a combination of like knowing what you like, knowing what drives you to do the creative stuff you do, filling up on that, but also understanding how to schedule yourself and not overburden yourself. I'm still working on the overburdening part, to be honest.
Do you have any plans to go to any conventions this year? I don't know what's going on with like Remix with all the football stuff.
I do not know that either.
MagFest or like,
I love MagFest, and I hope to go every year. So hopefully I'll be there. I might go to ASIN. I don't know. There's a whole thing that's up in the air with Amanda over here. I haven't decided whether or not to, because anime conventions are not entirely my thing. I don't keep up on anime as much as I used to. I think my favorite show is something from like 6 years ago, and I think that makes me a horrible old person who's just crotchety and no one wants to deal with.
And now you have to tell us what it is.
Nishijo, My Ordinary Life. It's the best show ever. Anyway, yeah, typically with conventions, I kind of like to be asked out to them to do a talk or to help show some game or something. I like to have a reason to be there because I'm very shy, and I get nervous with just having this whole wide convention floor open to me. Typically, I'll just find a TV and play Katamari in the game room or something. That's all I want to do. But with something like MagFest, I actually do just love being there so much. And seeing the music bands starting in the halls, essentially, a huge arcade. I do really enjoy MagFest. And GamerX is a great convention too. I don't know what's going on with that, but it's a place where you can go to see like a side of people who enjoy games that you probably didn't even know existed, I think. And it though it is a convention kind of created to support inclusiveness in games, everyone's welcome. Like, it's actual inclusiveness, I guess.
What is your wallpaper from?
Serial Experiments Lane. It's another great anime. Another washed up old person anime. Hell yeah. Right now I'm watching Megalobox. It's a good show. Yeah. So I'm a little current. Yeah, this is how I imagine myself. A girl, a computer, very lonely. Bunch of wires and stacks. Those are all my hard drives. Always back up your shit. I do have some plushes. I have a little dinosaur, and I have Persona 5 cat, Morgana. I got from the little box set thing. Anything else? Anybody curious about my car insurance situation?
Did you ever figure out if it was important?
It's pretty important.
Okay.
As it turns out.
Two others. And they'll force you to go along with the idea of importance.
Yeah.
What is a car important?
In Lexington, hell yeah. In Lexington, yes. I would love to live in a place where a car wasn't important, though. I really don't like driving that much. I kind of enjoy like long, thinking, meandering drives. So if I lived in a place where you couldn't drive, I think I would probably buy one of those truck simulator games and like a little racing wheel and do my little fake drives. YouTube. You got anything? Any
We're shutting down YouTube this way. It's too quiet.
any comments about
Shut down cloud
If I shut down the whole internet.
what's going on? What's going on in the news today? Did people has anyone said anything about my hair?
I haven't been able to take my eyes off of it. I didn't want to say it.
Well, it is hovering above this computer
Now that
monitor.
you brought it up, I'm
Okay.
gonna throw it out there.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
That's actually the whole reason they invited you. So you
Mhm.
make jokes about it later.
Mm-hmm.
What's your actual name?
Matthew Hopkins. It's like the best butler name ever. It's fucking rad.
And does your hair have a name?
Matthew Topkins.
Okay.
It's pretty good on the fly joke.
Yeah.
Off the top of your head.
Oh shit! Hi.
I got a
Yes, please.
do you think that when we see the color red, do we all see the same color?
No, I don't think we do at all. I think for every color, I think the thing is that for every color there is variation, but for red it's the most clear. Is that correct? Everyone sees red the most different?
There's actually something
I think that's right. I majored in pseudoscience. I don't know.
You majored in English.
Shut up.
Okay, actual question.
Don't believe
How
you.
often do you participate in game jams, and do you as a musician, what's your experience with game jams?
The one time that I participated in a game jam, it was amazing. It was, I want to say, was it Global Game Jam, Amanda, that one? I had this idea, I think it was not my idea at all, I think I stole it from someone, of showing up and just having like these index cards out and having a little placard and saying like, hey, I'm a sound designer and musician, I'll make something your game needs, don't go over the top, but take one of these cards, fill it out, and bring it back to me. And that was how I was making music for everyone there. That's actually a pretty good promotional tactic if you have any local game jams. Because I did end up actually getting work from that. People who were like, hey, I want to follow up on what I did for this game. Can you make some more of what you were making? And they paid me in cash, which is weird. They just like rolled up with a fat roll. Anyway, that's very aside the point. That was really effective, and it helped me meet a lot of people, cultivate relationships that I still keep, and just work on a bunch of radically different games in a very short period of time. It was a challenge too. I wish I could do more game jams. People will often message me and saying like, hey, do you want to be on a team? And I feel like I never have time, or I'm never ready to go when one of them comes around. But I don't know. I kind of want to just really challenge myself one day and just put out a tweet saying like, if you're participating in whatever game jam's going on right now, send me what sounds you need, and I'll try to make as many of them as I can. I like living my life though, so I don't know. Huh?
35 pixels.
Is that
That's our
what I could do with that?
coming up.
That would be better.
22nd of June.
It'd be more manageable.
You can do a horror game.
Ooh.
Yeah, horror game in Lizard Month? Fuck yeah.
Just make horror game sounds no matter what the game is.
That's a game jam idea. Right there.
Yo, we have a
All
theme.
sounds horror.
all sounds are horror, no matter what the rest of the game is. That's an idea.
Platform horror
Rules not a big horror game though.
You know, I've never seen a Godzilla horror game, and I feel like
I've never seen a good Godzilla game. It's real rough out there.
I think Destroy All Monsters Melee's okay.
Yeah. It's a GameCube thing. That's your thing.
I've never owned a GameCube.
Oh,
I
you're
still
so...
don't own a GameCube.
Yeah.
Must be before your time, Yanan. I tease Adam about being young. It's a thing. But there is a Japanese game that's not come over here yet called City Shrouded in Shadow. It's part of the survival series. I forget what it's called, but Raw Danger on the PS2 was one of these. Disaster Report was one of these. It's like a survival series where you are people in a city plagued by some sort of natural disaster. The last one they made was one that has like Ultraman and Godzilla and different kaiju. It looks really cool. And I'm thinking of importing it because then, even though I wouldn't understand any of the stuff in the game, it would be like I was a tourist in a city getting attacked by Godzilla, and I had to learn on the fly what to do. It'd be very realistic. So I've thought about buying that game.
Yeah, you could have bad neighborhoods that you should have avoided. So now
Yeah.
you have two problems.
Yeah, the neighborhood with all the Godzillas.
Oh no, there's other kinds of bad neighborhoods.
I don't
Things
believe
you
it.
could stumble into.
I don't believe it.
Yeah.
You just gotta worry about Godzilla.
Just gotta worry about Godzilla.
Oh.
Deal with the biggest problem first.
you just do a 1099.
Why are you wearing sunglasses?
It felt like the right time.
All right. I heard 1099. Who said 1099s?
I did.
Okay.
How do you do your taxes?
Oh, badly, poorly. No, taxes. I'm actually really proud of being able to fill out my taxes as, what is it? Sole proprietor, self-employed is what I do. The first time that I filed as that and not as like miscellaneous income was 2015. Felt pretty cool. It was also a lot. Shouldn't say this while I'm being recorded, but I don't do quarterlies. I should probably do quarterlies. But I always think I'm going to get a job and not have to. But I'm still freelance pretty much. I get W-2s from everyone that I work for who has a company, and otherwise I kind of just tally up all the income from, like, usually it's PayPal that I get paid through.
Rolls of cash.
Yeah, well, that's the great thing about getting rolls of cash, isn't it? It's pretty great. Yeah. Yeah, sure.
So on your ode to Jitsu, on the last song, there's like a number that's repeated. I was wondering what the significance of it was, if there was any.
I'll talk to you afterwards.
Okay.
It's a thing that I can't
That's fine.
talk about. It's a small thing, but yeah, it's essentially a sample. I'll talk to you about it. Thanks for asking about it.
Speaking of the Jet Set Radio album,
Okay.
so I'm completely ignorant of this entire kind of field of doing music and stuff. So obviously it's like sampling and stuff like that, but there's like actual like parts of the song where you use sound clips and voice clips from the game, or at least unused ones. I think there's the one that's the Jet Set Classic, the beginning part. What's kind of the legality of that?
Boy, these last two questions really
Yeah, it's rough, right? Sorry. I'm completely ignorant of it though. Like, I don't know what
so-
the terms are for that.
So my decision on it was that I think Sega appreciates these odes and this fan work, and they have in the past.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll get their stick out of their butt to do something with this franchise if I poke them a little bit.
Yeah.
So why not? But I did think that like what I was doing was pretty minimal. A lot of the voice clips that I use are actually unused, so not actually in the game. And I kind of wanted to play around with that and give people something they hadn't heard before. to surprise them.
Yeah.
A lot of people think I just hired Billy Brown.
I honestly thought you did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, in the future that would be awesome to surprise people with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, in that case, I kind of regret using them. I probably should have just done something differently, but I did what I did.
How did you hire Billy Brown?
Well, yeah. The only connection I possibly have is there's like a button on IMDb that is like, talk to this person's agent. He's on Real TV right now. He's probably doing real good.
Composer, like, talked about.
Yeah,
that was awesome.
I was very. I cried. Okay, like I cried. And the original composer, Hideki Naganuma, he did probably like 70% of the Jet Set Radio soundtrack. Really set the mood. I remember the process of this was that when I released the singles, somebody shared it with him and said, like, hey, you should check this out. And I'm from like the school of game development where as soon as press grabs onto your thing, that's the only time they're ever going to do it. That's like the one shot that you get. So I was really worried about it. I was like, oh no. Now that he's heard this so early, it kind of like blows my promotional thing. I was very mad at this person who tweeted at him, but he said, yeah, it's cool. I hear that sample that I used in there, and I was like, oh great, he thinks I'm just some loser. But on the day of release, I think like 2 hours after it went live, he said, I've listened to the whole thing. It's actually really good. Trust me. These are my two favorite tracks. So it completely blindsided me. I just fell apart. That, you know, because I think when I first heard his music in the 90s, I was just a little baby. And hearing that kind of music in a game just made me think, well, anything's possible now. Especially for me. I mean, I thought I wasn't going to be able to get into this, but here we go.
Yeah.
It's very good.
It's an awesome album.
Thank you. Who's got good celebrity stories? Anybody? Weird encounters with...
Oh, yeah.
Gross! Get out of here! Nobody wants to hear that.
You have a good celebrity story.
I have a really good celebrity story. Edward James almost kicked me off a bus. in 2013 in Houston, Texas. I was at my first. This is the first time I was flown out to do anything. It was the record label I was on at the time, Scrub Club Records. Flew me out to do a big show with everybody. We were all like internet friends, I guess is how it worked. But this convention was also happening at the same time as a Battlestar Galactica convention, where the entire cast of Battlestar Galactica was here at the same hotel that we were at, and I stopped watching the show at some point. So I was like, all right, cool, you guys are here. We were looking to get some food, me and one other person, and we ended up getting into a shuttle that the entire cast of Battlestar Galactica was also using to go get a meal. And Mr. Almos was under the impression that shuttle was reserved only for that cast, and probably thought I was just some sucker fan person, and took me somewhat roughly by the shoulder and said, son, you gotta get off here. And I was like, yes, Captain Adama. And that happened, and then the hotel people got really mad and were like, no, these shuttles are for everyone. And they put us back on there. So there we were awkwardly in the front of this bus with the entire Battlestar Galactica cast in the rest of the bus. They were just talking, being normal, to be fair. I think they realized that we weren't like trying to sneak onto their dinner thing or whatever. So it was fine. That's my one celebrity story. That's what I got.
So he didn't actually succeed at kicking you off?
No, not at all. I
Like
was
the show.
stowaway, just
No.
like the show. I was the sideline.
I've got a pretty run-of-the-mill celebrity story.
Okay.
So I was in Huntsville, Alabama.
Huntsville,
where
Alabama.
I was originally from, and I just bumped into a couple of my friends at this bar.
At a bar.
Restaurant. And
I'm repeating for YouTube.
At some point, I look behind me and there is, it sort of did a double take. There's Christopher Walken with
Okay.
2 or 3 people.
Christopher Walken?
One of the tables near behind us. And I just kind of looked away. That was my mistake, you know. Not gonna bother the famous person. But my 2 friends, like, at some point looked over and, like, stared for, like, a whole minute.
Oh.
And one of the guy's friends said, "You have admirers." Yeah, and that's it.
I was gonna say, please tell me they didn't start doing their impressions.
No,
Although that
no,
would
they
be
were just
amazing.
kind of stunned, and then.
Okay, 'cause then you would get to watch your friends like hang out to dry, doing Christopher Walken impressions right in front of Christopher Walken. That'd be
Not
amazing.
I don't think anybody really said much about it. And then later they denied it. My friends.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thanks so much for coming out and
Yeah,
speaking.
awesome job.
So, we're going to have a guest speaker or a speaker from within the community every month, starting today. The next one is coming up on the second Thursday of next month.
Second Thursday of next month, YouTube.
Second Thursday of next month, which is going to be June 14th.
June 14th. Like, comment, subscribe.
It's what is it? Is that Reptile Month?
Lizard month.
Lizard Month?
Yeah.
We also have an art night coming up. The art night is on June 7th. That's,
June 7th, art night.
Different Thursday. So the art night is just come and hang out and work on some art. No game dev experience required. I mean, none of our meetups have any experience required, but this one in particular, we're trying to see what artists are out there that maybe haven't done anything with games before, and get more people involved and get to know the people in the community. So that's going to be a really cool night.
And that was the 7th?
Yeah, 7th. That's art night. And then the 14th is industry speaker. The next speaker coming up is actually from within our community at Louisville Makes Games. Ava is going to be talking about the Pico 8 fantasy console. She's working on a really cool game called Accelerate, which is it's just looks awesome. It's a very easy to understand from a GIF kind of game. Like it's like it just looks so good in motion. But the Pico 8 fantasy console is really cool. It's kind of like making games for Nintendo, but it's little files that you can share with people quickly, and the game is within the image cover art of the game, which is really cool. And then we also have our regular game creators meetups. The next one of those is coming up on May 20th, and then again on June 3rd. So those are every other Sunday. And those are a time where we just kind of get to know people in our community that are working on games or interested in working on games, and hang out here and work on projects, get help with stuff, figure out where to get started with making games. So if anybody's new and hasn't been to any of those events before, feel free to come out and join us and make stuff. It'll be fun. So that's it. Thanks again for driving out here again one more time.
Of course, it was great.
I really appreciate it.